Welcome, everybody. Everyone that hasn't logged in yet. I hope we're doing this right. I hope you guys do get an opportunity to log in. I'm starting it a little bit early today. Not because I want 5 minutes of downtime, but I want to give everybody a chance to join in and participate. So, anybody, let's see. Let's do about 3 minutes. Oh, that's pretty cool. Spotlight option. How it like blurs the back. You know, like I'm the only part that's has any kind of focus. It's cool. Kind of like that. Stephen Edwards. Hello.
What?
Can you hear me, Stephen? So we had a few people confirm that they were going to watch, so I was trying to wait for a few of them to check in. But basically, the purpose of this is kind of a tech talk, and with the iManifold in mind. I don't know whether you've followed or watched anything on the iManifold or any of the discussions, but it's a pretty amazing tool, pretty amazing set of gauges that I believe will make a technician faster. Basically, it'll make your job easier. You know, I did a call the other day where, you know, we ended up having a low suction pressure, and we discovered the source of the low suction the old school way. You know, I went down and crawled the ducts and found that restriction. But, you know, ultimately when I went down there, I wasn't 100% what I was going to find. And with the features on this iManifold, it would have been much easier. I would have saved myself a lot of time in diagnostic. And, yeah, I would have had to ultimately go down and crawl that ducts and find that restriction manually. But the difference is I would have known way faster that we had a duct restriction or an airflow issue. And I would have went downstairs to crawl those ducts to find the problem. I would have went in knowing what I was going to find, basically, instead of just kind of searching to check things off my list. And it would have been much faster. Oakwood.
What's happening?
Mr. David, how's it going?
Not bad. How about you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. I'm got a busy day today, man. We had I still got 3 more calls. I was lucky enough. I didn't know if I was going to make this 6 o'clock, but I was lucky enough to have 4 calls right by my house. So we kind of jumped in real quick, do this video chat. We're going back out for 3 more calls. So we kind of got lucky to make it on time.
Wow, that's not bad though. Busy is good.
Yeah, it's busy today. You know, it wasn't so busy yesterday, but today it just went crazy. It's a good thing though.
Yeah, we've been doing now that we've expanded the area, and then I'm on board with Reardon and the whole team over there. We've been doing a lot more stuff up in the Raleigh side of things. We're doing a 2-day job. We started today pulling a pack and then zoning it for 3 zones, changing some of the ductwork around, and what a blast that is.
Yeah, how fun. You guys do some cool stuff. You know, I see all you guys' videos, and you do some nice installs, but it's so much different than out here. You know, we never set nothing on any kind of supports. You know, I see all you guys with your some have bricks, some have supports. You know, basically they sit on supports up in, I imagine, the call chase or the basement. You know, but we have to hang everything from the ceiling on supports, so everything's kind of supported from the roof, and that's a bit different. But you know, it's cool. It's nice when you got a lot of room in that attic or wherever you're putting it to do some nice ductwork. You know, when you can make it pretty. That's a nice thing.
Yeah, it's always nice to see that. The odd thing is, we have the option. A lot of guys do hang it over here, but I don't see a lot of people doing it on the regular just because they'll let you get away. I mean, shoot, I saw a picture the other day from one of our guys that had a unit that was standing on, I think it was 4 red bricks all turned on end, and 2 of them weren't even touching. We're not even sure how it was still standing there. I'm pretty sure whatever was supporting the ducts was what was holding that whole damn unit up.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's funny what you see sometimes.
Yeah, I'm surprised they let you get away with such, but I guess certain counties down here, they don't really care. It's just a bunch of country bumpkins, and as long as it runs, who cares?
Yeah. Out here, I could put a 2-ton on a 5,000 square foot home, and that would pass. Wouldn't work, but essentially they have an air conditioner that works and puts out a 20-degree split. That's all it takes. I mean, if it's got a 20, you're good. They don't have no rules about sizing, so it's up to us to try to do a good job, you know. And of course they'll complain, but you know, essentially, yeah, it's crazy what they'll let you get away with.
That's insane.
There's no air conditioning police per se.
Yeah, we have to. I'm pretty sure you have to turn in a manual J with your permit application here. And if it doesn't match up, you're done.
Are you serious? Wow.
Yeah, it has to be done on every single home, and I guess it's a lot of it has to do with the age of the homes and the fact that they're building so much so quickly here. You know, you've got to kind of meet the same requirements as everybody else. But you know, pretty much every house I've been to in the past, at least the past 2 months, maybe 3, since it's been strictly air conditioning, I've seen a lot of half-ton to full-ton increases over what was existing. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's just a change in everything. You know, higher efficiency. Unfortunately, not enough change of ductwork, which is what I'd like to see. But you know, can't win them all.
Yeah. You know, in a perfect world, we'd be doing it the way we would like it on our own home, but ultimately it's up to the customer. You know, we can recommend what we want them to do, and I guess if we tell the truth and are convincing, usually they'll do it, but it is up to them. So
yeah.
For some reason, a lot of people don't want to change the ductwork. You know, they think they're just in their head, it's the air conditioner that's the problem, and, you know, we can suggest it, but yeah, it's nice when you can.
Yeah, especially with the way things are down here. I mean, the majority of stuff I deal with, box and flex, which is in most cases a nightmare. You know, there's really not much. It's not ideal, and you know, I like that now that I've switched to working at Cape Fear. They use everything's round when we do full duct changeouts. You know, I would prefer to see round pipe over box and flex because Lord knows you can't get solid static on box and flex.
Interesting. Yeah, that's pretty cool that you went over to work with Steven, Mr. Raridan. You know, it's nice when you can work with good guys. You know, you got a good team, it goes a long way, you know.
Yeah, they've got some good guys, and
sometimes I wish I could hire some of you guys from YouTube. You know, it's tough finding people that are qualified, you know, and if they are, you just find somebody reliable, that you can trust to go into somebody's home and not hurt your reputation. That's tough. Yeah. And it's really just finding guys that care. You know, that's what I find about YouTube is I find it's probably most of the people that care, because they care enough to try to search for information and try to do their job better and critique, you know, find ways to become better. And they just care. Caring goes a long way. If you care, you're probably going to do a good job. Yeah. Even if you don't know something, if you care enough, you're going to go find that information out before you make a mistake. If you care. So I try to hire people that care. And if they care, should be well. You know?
Yeah, I think that's about the most important thing you can do. I mean, like I say all the time, I didn't go to school for this. I didn't really get trained by anybody. I get tossed to the wolves, and you know, most times they would say, "Call me, and I'll talk you through it when you get there. You know, figure it out on your own." And if you take the time to look stuff up, read a book, you know, you're better than the guy who just kind of stands there and goes, "Well, suction pressure is up over 60. We should be good."
Yeah. You know, like you say, the guy with the book, you know, I used to be the guy that thought I had to know everything. You know, or when you go to a customer and you're talking, you know, you're under the impression that you're the professional. You're supposed to know this stuff. You're supposed to know everything. Yeah. You know, but I think that's a mistake too, because then you're not going to ask if you don't. I mean, everybody can learn something, and it's okay not to know. It's okay to go find out and do it right, you know. In the real world, nobody knows everything, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I've never been stumped before. Heck, I worked for a guy down here last year, you know, when I was still kind of figuring things out. He was a engineer for Carrier and their commercial units. he took me through. He designed everything in his house. He took me through his reasoning behind it and all this stuff. And all I could do was shake my head and make it seem like I knew what I was doing. Because everything he was saying was way above my head. And I was like, this is one of those occasions where I wish I had all the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I did a call one day for the nuclear physicist. He worked on the cooling tower that cooled the nuclear power plant.
Oh, geez. Yeah, so he knows this shit.
And to sell him an air conditioner, he wanted to know if I knew what would happen if you shot a gun in a perfect vacuum. All the crazy questions he was asking me, I was like, wow, this fucking... And he was crazy. He had white, curly, crazy hair like this and glasses kind of tilted sideways. Straight Einstein.
Yeah, some of them get interesting.
A gun in a perfect vacuum.
Let's try it.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. He said, the bullet would just drop. So, yes, well.
Should I have waited 5 minutes and asked me again?
Can I Google it? John, how you doing?
All right, pretty good, Steve. How you doing? I was trying to figure out how to do this on my phone.
I got you figured out, though. That's cool.
Yeah. I got a couple accounts, so I had to move a couple things there.
Awesome. So, yeah, you guys, thanks for joining. I don't know how many people are going to join. These kind of hangouts are hard for everybody. Everybody having so much different timings and everybody working.
Yep.
Hell, I just, like I was telling Stephen and David a second ago, I got 3 more calls myself. I was lucky enough to be by my house to make the 6 o'clock broadcast, and then we're bailing out for 3 more calls. I see you're in your work too.
Yeah, it's kind of my quiet place.
That's cool. So, yes, the title of this thing is the iManifold, and whether it makes you a better tech or not, or faster tech, but to me, faster is better. So better is a matter of opinion. What better means, I don't think the iManifold puts any more information in your head. It doesn't make you more knowledgeable or more experienced, but it really throws a lot of information at you that you can use right there to make your diagnostic way faster, if you ask me. Specifically, I don't know, how much everybody's watched or paid attention to iManifold discussions, but I made the purchase, and now that I got all the accessories and I've finally got kind of an understanding of how to get all the features working, I think it's going to make me way faster and, well, better, because I don't have to take as many steps to get information, and so it's just quicker, everything down to these wireless probes, like this, for instance, every gauge I know. Here's one example why I like the iManifold, but I guess this could work for any kind of wireless gauge, is that, these hoses, every time you put them on a system, you're stealing an ounce or 2 or some,
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I don't like that. If I was on a system recently and I thought the charge was good, and I'm there for something like, let's say, a condenser motor or some sort of small electrical thing, in the past I have not wanted to put my gauges on, unless I thought it was a refrigeration thing. It depends on the call, but with this, I don't have to worry about it so much because we're only losing, I don't know, 1/4 ounce, So
mm-hmm.
That's one situation why you can throw your gauges on everything without worrying about losing charge. So I really like that, but what I was saying about whether it makes you a quicker tech, the other day, for instance, I go on a call and it's iced up. So it's a heat pump. We throw it into defrost, melt the ice, and when we turn it back on, everything seems to be working okay. But that's when we had the suction panel off. Basically, we troubleshooted this thing for a few minutes because pressures were good, then they weren't, they were, then they weren't. And so, when you see low suction, you start looking at your head, trying to determine what's causing that suction to be low. Is it low on charge? Is it a restriction? Is it airflow? But I had enough experience in this place. I knew the coil was clean, knew the filters were clean. Matter of fact, I had cleaned the coils. So after troubleshooting this thing, we determined we had an airflow issue because it wasn't none of this other stuff. And I was able to take my supply panel off, lean it over, let the air blow out, bypass the ductwork. Suction pressure stayed at a decent pressure. I think it was running about 40 degrees. But this machine ices up. And the old company was just there time and time again. They said they were there every week. So having that panel, we took the panel off, suction stays up, put the panel on, suction drops. So I knew I had a duct issue, but all in all, it took me quite a while to troubleshooting to figure this out. Hey, Joe.
Hey.
Welcome. Glad you could make it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes. So, yeah, guys, I was troubleshooting this thing for, 45 minutes, quite a while. I didn't have no stopwatch out, but a while. And it was an odd one, my superheat wasn't low, and what it really was boiled down to was this supply damper wasn't working intermittently. So I'm sure one of those times I was checking it, it was open, then it was closed, but I didn't have my airflow working, or the estimated airflow on the iManifold working at the time. So I was just watching superheat, subcooling, pressures. Anyway, we determined that it was that supply damper being stuck shut, and that was causing the machine to ice up. Wasn't enough airflow across that evaporator, and I think to myself, man, if I had this iManifold telling me right off the top, airflow's low, you see your CFMs, you see your low suction pressure, it's not so much investigation after that. You flat out know why. So I would have went straight downstairs and went and found my duct restriction rather than having to go through all those extra steps of troubleshooting. I would have been off that roof way faster. And so to me, that makes me a better tech. I think about, not just being a good tech, but I think for the company. I think that a tech needs to be bing, bang, boom, and the more calls you can hit in one day properly, the better you are. So to me, I'm a better tech if I can move faster, and just seeing all that extra information takes it a long way. And so to me, that's better. Doesn't make me more experienced, doesn't put extra information, like I said, but sure, all that information thrown at you, you're really getting a good idea of how that machine's running, just like that. And we could do it the old school way, we could do it all the old school methods, but essentially take time, So I'm really happy with the purchase, and Joe, I was telling them earlier, one thing else I like about it is I like that I can throw this on almost any machine, and I don't have to worry about stealing 2 ounces of refrigerant from those long hoses, So I really like that about it too, Put it on every call you run by without being worried about it.
Yeah, it's nice. It is nice. I'm not 2 ounces out of 20 pounds, though, really, So
2 ounces out of 20 pounds over the course of 10 years you're servicing it could be bad, though.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not a big deal, but,
You got 5 pounds.
You'd rather
6
keep it in there.
Pounds, But you're right. I mean, putting it on once, is that going to make a difference? Probably not. But, if for me, if you want to try and perfect your trade, it is a concern, taking refrigerant out. Is it big? Nah. But I don't like doing it.
And I think there's a flip side to that coin. I think I'm doing my customers a favor by not trying to suck out whatever's in my hose back into their system, you know? Like I see a lot of you guys kind of open up your manifold and let it suck back through, and you know that you have a lot of chance of putting all kinds of stuff in there doing that from the last job and sitting in your truck and working in the rain. And so I guess there's kind of two sides to that. That's why I don't ever. But yeah, that's a nice way. I do like the short probes.
Yeah. On that note, I was kind of playing with the idea of buying a set for every type of refrigerant. Or, you know, I stopped doing commercial refrigeration, and I used to do all the IHOPs. I got rid of all them accounts, fired Applebee's and IHOP. I just don't want to do commercial refrigeration anymore. We got enough residential. But, so, you know, R410A and 22, 2 sets of these, you know, could go a long way. And then you got an iManifold for both. Or I've been considering using the manifold in its own hoses for one refrigerant, wireless for another. But yeah, you're right. That's a concern too. You know, that's on that note. That's why I don't even have an iConnect. I don't know what I need an iConnect for. To me, an iConnect. Let's say I walk up and I put these on. You notice I got it rigged here, so.
So why would you have? Yeah, you have the.
Well,
right.
Yeah, I mean I don't. So to me, you got to have this. You can't work with just an iConnect. You've got to have this because what you can do with this is vacuum. I mean, you could probably vacuum an iConnect, but you're right. You don't want to contaminate the system, so I like being able to hook my vacuum pump up to the thick one. I'll have my refrigerant already hooked up here, of course, off. You know, you can have them off and separated. Lines hooked up here. I got the micron gauge coming off the back side of the vacuum pump. But then it allows me to open and close everything and never cross-contaminate. You know, I can pull the vacuum. What I don't like is when somebody pulls a vacuum and then takes their hose off the vacuum and puts it over here on their refrigerant. They just crack the system, and I don't know, they're going to get something in there, minute amount of air or something. So I like having everything hooked up right away. I like having the thick hose, and when I'm done vacuuming, I want to shut everything down and close it off so no refrigerant goes through to my micron gauge. I've just had a lot of experience with them failing in the past, micron gauges, but and so I don't like refrigerant in there. But you know, you got to have the manifold if you want to be able to do that. You can't do it with a Connect. So that's why I don't have an iConnect, because yeah, you gotta, if you're gonna have that system open, you want to have your vacuum, your refrigerant, everything hooked up all at once, just opening and closing the right valve. You know, I got this so I could you know, screw that on and ultimately have whatever I want there and then open and close it. You know, just another little add-on if I got to do that, you know. But
so you use the probes and the manifold?
I use the probes when I'm checking things, you know. If there's already refrigerant in the system and I'm just checking it or adjusting it or something to tune up. But if I got to do like a repair, whatever it might be, leak repair, if I'm dumping the system, if it's going to be open, then no, I just go with the manifold because, like I said, I want to have vacuum pump gauges, everything hooked up at one time. You know, I just don't like moving the hose from one to the other. So yeah, I just go with the manifold if I'm going to do a leak repair or anything.
Yeah, I'm of the opposite thought. I tend to use like a 1/2-inch hose with the core remover. Usually, I'll just pull from the suction side, yank the core, shut it off when I'm done, and then now that I'm using iConnect, connect that up because I charge for the line set. Then I'll go ahead and open up on new installs. I'll charge for the line set and then go ahead and open up my service valves. Call it from there. As far as I see, I mean, if you were to flip a can of 410, vacuum the hose down, when you open that can up, there could be, you know, that minute amount of air in that at the, you know, before you get a good liquid spray, you can get yourself a minute shot of air, just straight up gas. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it should be solid liquid. You know, gas is gas. It's still refrigerant, but I prefer it the old-fashioned way, I guess, without just pulling that one hose. And I haven't had any issues with it. I mean, I did 6 straight months of nothing but installs, and the only thing that failed was one TXV that I unfortunately smacked with my forehead a little too far, a little too hard, and that was that. Everything else is run like a charm, and that method pretty well.
Well, it's minor. We talk like I don't want to suck air in and all, but you know what? Excuse my language, I don't know how many years I used to have analog gauges, and I used to move the hose, and pull a good vacuum, charge it right, you're not going to have a problem. I wonder this though. So most grounded compressors can be caused by improper refrigerant charge. A little moisture in the system, acidic. Eventually, you're melting that insulation on those wires.
Right.
So, I say that I never had any callbacks on maybe getting a little stuff in there, because lately we're trying to really take it to the full another level. But I don't know if it's for our peace of mind, so we can feel like we're doing amazing or something. But we know we're doing as good as we can. But that being said, 20 years, I've been doing this since I was I was doing air conditioning after middle school with Dad. I don't remember learning. I just kind of did it, and then one day it just kind of came natural. And then after 10 years, I went to school. But in all that time, I did it the old school way. Never had any problems. But did I cause a little acidic refrigerant maybe? And did the compressor ground after 8 years because of that? Maybe. I don't know. I guess I wouldn't have always heard about it, but there's a slight chance of that happening, So I think trying to make sure there's nothing in there is going to take a long way of just the confidence. That, like I tell the customers, the difference between a perfect charge and a charge that's close isn't a machine that doesn't turn on. It's not a machine that breaks next month. Because unfortunately, we could flow over there, we could throw some Freon in there, jam it in, and blows cold. Everybody's happy. We leave, we got the money, customer thinks everything's good, but it's unfortunate that they might have a problem 5 years from now. So the difference between a perfect charge and an okay charge is a machine that might last 5 years or a machine that lasts 20 years. Is it going to take that slow damage? Is the refrigerant acidic or not? Hey, Jim?
Wow, the man himself.
Hey, Dan.
I know, I feel blessed. We were just talking about some, things the iManifold does or doesn't do, and how I think it makes you a better tech. I'm not saying it puts more information in your head. I'm not saying it makes me personally smarter. But it gives me information quicker with less work. And I don't always think about me. When I say makes you a better tech, I don't mean you or me, for instance. Maybe me. It could be everybody. But I also think about my employees. I'm thinking about the new tech. I'm thinking about guys I put to work. If I don't make their job easy, they might not do it properly. What if I got a tech out there that the other day I was talking about that call that I troubleshooted it for an hour and then found a restriction in the ductwork. It was a damper that was stuck shut. Took me quite a while because it was a little bit odd. There were multiple issues why that damper was causing it to be the problem, but I didn't have my iManifold airflow working. If I had, right off the top, I would have seen low suction pressure, low airflow, bam. I would have went down there and found my duct restriction. There would have been so much less troubleshooting time involved, and I would have been in and out of that call way faster. I believe a tech in and out faster is better because he gets more calls done that day. And so as a business owner, I want my technicians using this tool because it makes their job easier for them. If I make it easy for them, they'll probably do a better job for me. That's how I see it. You know, um, you know, uh, returning supply temperature. I mean, these 911Ms right here. You know, how much better is it to simply scroll through your little iPad or your iPhone and just kind of go right through looking at your pressures, your superheat, your subcooling, your head pressure, return temp, supply temp, split. I mean, calculating your target superheat. This is making your job so much easier. If your job's easier, I think you're more likely to be better at it.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I can tell you from last summer, all I did all summer was maintenance calls, nonstop maintenance. Very little service, a lot of follow-up stuff, but all maintenance. If I had the ability to just sit outside and watch things, you kind of. I know it happens to me occasionally, especially when it gets real hot and you're nothing but backed up. You just kind of want to get through the call. I'm here to do an Angie's List tune-up. This person spent $65. They don't care if the system is 100% or not. But if I'm going to go there and do the maintenance, I want to make sure that it's working the best it possibly can be after I've touched it. But then you reach a point where you're kind of like, I don't want to sit out here, have to run back and forth, get, wet bulb, check the temperatures, see if I got the right split, do the calculation to see what my split should be, where I should be. I mean, this is like, especially now doing startups over the last couple weeks, I plug everything in, and the install that Steve did the other day, I mean, at first I ended up dumping probably I think it was 5 pounds of refrigerant total into the system that was leaking, and just to get this guy cooling, and we end up changing it out. And at that time, with the old system, I think target superheat being a piston, it was like 13. I think I had 15, and subcooling was up around 20. Then he installs the system. We end up flushing the line set, installs the system, and I think, Jim, you probably saw it. I think you commented on it a couple times. We were having, the first thing I saw when I looked at it, temperatures look good, pressures look good, superheat and subcool are, right on. CFM is great. But when you look at the ER rating for a 15 SEER machine that was just installed, it's running at 10. If I were using a regular set of gauges and walking back and forth inside that house, I'd never know that it wasn't running as well as I think it should be, which would make me think that, seeing that it's running at a 10 EER, I'd have to assume that something's not right, without him checking static pressure and seeing if there was something going on with the ductwork, which from the looks of it, it's fairly new ductwork. It was done well. I have to wonder if it was sized properly, and this is with the blower on high all the way up that he gets these readings. But if I had just done it if someone had done it the old school way, if you get the right temperature split and you get the right superheat and subcooling, you call it good enough. Seeing that kind of makes me wonder: is there more that I don't know that I should know? And that's what makes me better.
Are you still taking those? Are you still usually putting the probes in the grills?
No, me and Steve have both changed to doing it at the return and the supply plenums, usually like within a foot of the unit.
Okay, yeah.
12 to 16 inches out.
Right.
We discovered probably 2 weeks ago that using a grill is kind of giving me a false reading, especially with the way they run ductwork here in North Carolina. They just run it any which way through a 75-foot 6-inch duct run going through the entire hot attic just to get to the first floor is pretty common around here.
And yeah, you actually have a lot of turbulence at the register where air is actually getting sucked back in. If that sounds crazy, but
it
is happening. Yeah, right there. So I was just curious about that because that could But see, that's my thing with iManifold is these readings are only good as the measurements that are taken, and there's so many parameters that can be different. It's going to be hard to really get a solid set of. Yeah, each job just.
It does give you a lot of information, and yeah, I found it's been a learning curve for me, for instance, just to learn how to work it right, making sure I'm using the software right, making sure I'm entering the parameters right. Is it a standard efficiency, high efficiency evaporator? Jim helped us with that the other day and how what they meant. Just put every little thing like that, I think, goes into whether your parameters are right. To test your EER, you got to make sure all those parameters were correct. It's supposed to come out with some barcode scanner, they were saying, where it'll scan the model serial and then pull up its own parameters, and so it won't be up to us to enter the parameters anymore, and that'd be pretty cool. That would, I assume, would be pretty accurate.
Yeah,
I don't know how well that scanner is going to work on an old faded unit, but maybe if we could just enter the model serial and it has like a database where it knows all what unit that'd be awesome. Is it going to have a database if we enter model and serial someday, Jim?
No, he's muted. No audio.
Looks like he's talking.
Yeah, I don't think he's got audio.
Okay. You can message it over, Jim, if we're having an issue or something.
I can't see the messages. Will you read it? What he says?
I will if one comes in. Oh, he says I'm trying to get audio now, so maybe he'll kick in a minute.
Okay.
Not sure what's going on, but yeah, it does boil down to entering the parameters right, testing it properly. But I've been guilty of sitting outside charging. I get my superheat and subcooling right, then I go inside and take a split before you leave.
Mm-hmm.
I really like not having to do that, and I like being able to just get it right from there. It's like you're giving it the all clear on every level, right there. And to me, that's pretty cool.
See, out here,
even you know what? It's a pain in the butt to go down there and get these things and go to the return and supply. It takes time. You're waiting for it to calibrate. You're taking a return, and then you supply. By the time this thing's calibrated on the supply, the return's 3 degrees lower, because the house is cooling. So there's that. You're going back and forth if you really want to do it right. I mean, that's a real life situation where it's just making it faster. It's calculating it right off the top and using them both, giving you the difference. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think out here we've got, Raleigh is big in the in software and computers and developing now. So a lot of customers I go to are actually concerned with how it works, which is kind of counterintuitive to some of the areas outlying the triangle. And the further out you go, kind of country bumpkin, as long as it cools, I'm good. But here, now that I've been able to kind of use it, I've had the app on my phone for a year now, and I've entered it in just to kind of check things, use check and charge and stuff like that. And of course, I'm guilty of using cheap manifolds instead of liquid gauges and stuff, something that's actually more accurate than a standard gauge. But here people actually want to see how it's performing. So if I can walk over there and show them, hey, this is where you should be. This is where we're sitting at. This is why. This is what's actually happening. Here's your performance. This is what we're looking at. People kind of, they're more prone to listen to what I have to say about. Here's a repair. Here's an option to fix this. Here's what you can upgrade your system and get something better. They down here good for example, make explaining something much easier.
getting some something going on.
Oh yeah, echo.
I'm gonna start muting all the time and see. How's that? Huh.
Still there.
All right.
All right. Gotta get the mic.
Oh.
What's going on?
Try that again.
I'm gonna mute mine. Let's see if it's me.
All right. Is that any better? Just as bad.
Huh. It's weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, we got Jim back. Oh.
Any better?
It's not. John M. I was wondering if that was like right then when you started. Did you log out or something?
Oh, my phone crashed. My phone was overheating because I was charging it.
Gotcha. Try one more thing. I'm gonna drop the bandwidth down a notch. Okay.
I actually think it is John because his audio goes up every time. Someone else talks.
Oh, is it YouTube or something?
Audio goes up.
Well, that's crap.
Well, I can try to disconnect. I'll try.
Try to reconnect it.
So Jim, anywhere in the database?
What's it?
You're sideways.
I know. I'm trying to get out of here.
How's that?
See, I think it's fun.
That's better.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because he was on a mobile phone in his truck and he was like getting I think his audio was coming back through his speaker.
Might have been coming back to the headset.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So you guys can hear me now, okay?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Oh, good. All right. So, couple of things I was going to say, because I taught school for 13 years, taught an HVAC program at Cuyahoga Valley Career Center up in Brecksville, Ohio. And one of the things with the iManifold app, when you really stop and think about what it does, and it's sort of like going from trying to diagnose by pictures, one reading at a time, make a reading, sort of look at it, see what's going on there, make another reading, and then all of a sudden go into video camera and seeing everything happen at once. And I think, a lot of guys don't appreciate, and when I tell somebody it actually makes you a better tech, it's because you actually see all the relationships of everything happening at one time. You get to see, as soon as you add gas, what happens to the low side, what happens to the high side, what happens to superheat, what happens to subcooling, what happens to your your latent sensible split, your latent cooling, your sensible cooling, and if you're watching on trending, I use trending a lot. It's probably my favorite feature of the iManifold. You actually get to see how small changes in charge or airflow or cleaning the condenser, how it improves the equipment performance. And I don't think a lot of people have ever got to see everything in one fell swoop, because you're not, even things like watching a load change. As you start up a system, you're going to see at first, if it's really hot in the house, you have a lot of capacity. And as the house cools down, the capacity of the machine will drop off. The humidity will drop. The sensible cooling will drop. And those are things you can't, you normally don't have an opportunity to see because you're not inside watching each variable independently. So I think, and also we live test everything on the iManifold application. I have equipment in the lab, and then I go on our rooftop units at work, or a lot of times I'm out in the field. In wintertime, I'll fly down to Florida, and I've got 28 years of experience now, and I cannot beat my own application in troubleshooting. Because all the readings come in at one time, and it's diagnosing up to 50 points of data at once. No matter how good of a technician you are, you can't work faster than the computer works, at least to get put into the right direction. And obviously the trick with accurate troubleshooting is accurate profiling, which is probably the biggest challenge for most technicians, is understanding how to properly profile a system. But once you get that element of the application down, then the rest of it's really easy.
That's a good way to put it. It shows you the relationship in real time. That's a good way to put it.
And if you really start watching what's going on, it's an excellent teaching tool. I even use it offline all the time when I'm looking at psychometric calculations, or what happens, especially if you take a young technician and you have it working on like a lot of times we'll use a little window air conditioner and put it in the shop where the load doesn't change, and we'll just talk about, okay, I'm gonna block off the evaporator coil with this piece of paper here. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to the low pressure? Most people know. What's going to happen to the high pressure? What's going to happen to the superheat? What's going to happen to the subcooling? And when you're on a fixed orifice system, and all of a sudden you start to see not only does the suction pressure drop, but the evaporator starts to flood, the condenser starts to starve, the suction pressure drops because we're not absorbing heat, which drops the high pressure because we're not absorbing heat, and the amp draw starts to drop off. You start to see how each part of the system affects the entire system. And that's where we get fixated as technicians a lot of times when you're troubleshooting. And right now the entire industry is fixated on superheat and subcooling, which are part of the equation, but they aren't the entire equation by any means. In fact, the pressures, the only reason we measure pressure is to get temperature, which most people don't think about. But that temperature of the coils is the driver for the heat transfer. And so obviously the evaporator is colder than the return air, which drives the rate of heat transfer based on the time, the temperature difference, and the turbulence. Condenser is hotter than the outdoor air, which drives the rate of heat transfer out of it. So those two temperatures are probably the most critical things as far as the rate of heat transfer in a system, and we neglect them all the time as an industry as a whole. And if you had grown up in refrigeration, I don't know if any of you guys do refrigeration, but almost everybody in refrigeration, they're fixated on saturation temperatures. They almost never really look at pressures. They don't even think in pressures. It's a whole different mindset. And the air conditioning industry never caught on to that for some reason, probably because it was really started by plumbers. That went into, we had obviously heating, steam heating, hot water heating. Then we got into forced air heating and then cooling, and it was really the plumbing industry that started the cooling industry. So they didn't quite have all the experience the refrigeration mechanics had of the day. So, but anybody got any questions?
Yeah, when you say you look at the pressures more than the temps, what exactly, expound on that a little bit for us.
So every coil is engineered with what's called a design temperature difference. So you see in the application DTD.
Right.
And sometimes you hear CTOA, which is condensing temperature over ambient. So what that means is how much colder is the evaporator supposed to be than the return air, and how much hotter is the condenser supposed to be than the outdoor air.
Right.
Okay? And by design, that's what's going to govern the rate of heat transfer into the evaporator and out of the condenser. So if you were to look at a Sporlan temperature pressure chart, if you got one, you can pull it out and look at it. You'll see on the back side of the chart, it'll tell you design temperature differences for meat coolers, for ice machines, for all these different applications, probably about 10 different applications. And that's what the refrigeration industry focuses on most of the time when they say, what's the DTD for the evaporators? How much colder is the evaporator supposed to be than the freezer? So typically it'll be like 10 to 15 degrees colder than the box temperature. Same exact thing in the air conditioning industry. But typically in our industry, the evaporator is always 35 degrees colder than the return air. So if you had 75 degree return air minus 35, you'd had a 40 degree evaporator, right? Now, back in the day, the condenser, if you've got a couple years under your belt, you probably heard some old timer tell you condensing temp plus 30 or outdoor air temp plus 30. And that was the condenser is 30 degrees hotter than the outdoor air, okay? And so as the condensers have gotten bigger, we have more surface area. So to transfer the same, remember heat is a quantity, so to transfer the same quantity of heat energy at a lower temperature difference requires a larger coil. Because we're moving BTUs, which is a quantity of heat. So the larger the condenser gets, the lower the temperature difference has to be to transfer the same quantity of heat. So on a 10 SEER piece of equipment, that temperature difference dropped from 30 degrees down to 25. And then when we get on a 13 SEER, it drops down. 13, 16 is about 20 degrees hotter than the outdoor air. And then you get into the 18 to 20 SEER, you're getting down to about a 15 degree temperature difference. Now here's the key thing. You go, well, shoot, why don't we just make the condensers huge? And then we could get the temperature difference down to 0. Well, then the heat transfer would stop because the condenser's always got to be hotter. In other words, for heat to transfer, it always travels one direction from hot to cold. If there's no temperature difference, the heat transfer stops.
Yeah, you can't cool it below ambient.
Right, you can't cool it below the ambient. And in order for the refrigerant to change state, we have to have a pressure drop in order to change state. So the condenser, if it gets too big, you don't have enough pressure drop across your expansion device to drop the refrigerant down to its saturation temperature. So it all works together that way. So when you get on a system, most of the time the design temperature difference for the evaporator is going to be 35 degrees. That's where I'd always start at. And then you just have to start looking at your condenser and figure out, what's your what series of condenser. Now, if you're talking, I believe 1989 is when they came into the 10 SEER, and it was it 2012 they went to or 2002 they went to the 13 SEER mandate?
2006.
2006. So if you look at dates on equipment, you can pretty much tell, what that is. Now, somebody asked, are we going to have a database of equipment? And actually, yes. We just licensed the AHRI database. So they're going to put the entire AHRI database up in our cloud, and it'll be able to pull down then models and serial numbers of equipment, and it won't pull down design temperature difference because AHRI doesn't have that, but it will pull down the actual capacity, the rated capacity of the machine versus the nominal that we're working with right now. So and it'll also start to pre-populate, like when you're in Google or something, you start to type out and it starts pre-filling in the models or whatever. It'll start doing that also as you start typing in, YCD030, and then it might start popping up the numbers behind it. You'll pick the one that you want to pick for the models and serial numbers. And if you haven't gotten the latest version of the app out, we just put in barcode scanning. It's not released yet for Apple, but it is on Android. Apple will be out sometime this week, and it'll if the equipment has barcodes on it, you can or QR codes, either one it'll work on. You can pull in the models and serial numbers that way.
Jim, from the outside, from someone looking in, it looks like the ARI does some wacky things to get the numbers kind of where they need them to be sometimes, as far as the CFMs that they're testing it at. Would you agree with that, or what's your input on that?
Well, it's not AHRI doing that. It's actually the manufacturers doing that.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah.
They're gaming the system.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're doing is on some of these high efficiency systems, like a Carrier Infinity system, for example, it has a way oversized evaporator coil, and so they drop the airflow down to 350 CFM per ton. And if you look at the manual on the Carrier Infinity system, it's got a comfort mode and an efficiency mode dip switch, and in the efficiency mode, it actually goes to 400 CFM per ton, and in the comfort mode, down to 350 CFM per ton. Now, when they test that at AHR, they test it at 400 CFM per ton to get the efficiency, the rated efficiency out of the piece of equipment. But Carrier knows that nobody's ever going to be comfortable at 400 CFM per ton, because what happens when you oversize your evaporator coil is you raise your suction pressure. When you raise your suction pressure, you raise your suction temperature. When you raise the temperature of the evaporator coil, it no longer dehumidifies. So if you're out in Las Vegas, you're fine at 400 CFM per ton. You may even want to take it to 450 CFM a ton because you don't have any latent load to deal with. And in fact, if you're in Vegas and you don't run it at 400 to 450 CFM per ton, you'll never get your rated capacity out of it, because the equipment's rated for latent load, and it just does. They don't have it out there.
I could care less about dehumidification.
Right,
not in my book. It doesn't ever enter here.
But if you install any system out in your area and you are at a nominal 400 CFM per ton in Vegas, you will never get, like if you had a 5-ton system, you'd be running about 47,600 BTUs. Right, unless you get that airflow up to about 425 to 450 CFM per ton.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so you'll see that all the time. It'll drive you crazy, because all you're doing is a sensible cooling that the system's rated for, because when AHR rates a piece of equipment, it's at 80 degrees return air dry bulb, 50% relative humidity, and 95 degrees outdoor air. Right. So if
that's really not any accurate.
Yeah, well, not for what. Well, but that's what it's rated for. But then they also have what's called typical design, which is 75, 50, and 95. So anytime you drop the return air dry bulb, so if you go from 80 degrees down to 75 degrees, you're automatically going to start losing capacity off the machine, because it's rated for that higher return air dry bulb temperature. So you typically will never see close to your AHRI conditions unless you're doing a hot pull down in a home and you have humidity.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I'm in what most would call a humid environment, Jim, and I'm still running my equipment about 425 per ton. I'm using large evaporators, and they're warm. They're like 25 below return air. Doing this with lower compressor and then longer run times, still dehumidifying the same with the longer run times, coming in at the lower end of the manual J's. Follow me on that?
Only if your coil falls below the dew point temperature, right? Because the coldest you can get the furthest you can get the dew point down to is the temperature of the evaporator coil. So, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. The longer run times will help, but it's still not gonna get as dry as if you were able to drop the coil temperature down further.
That's funny, the difference in how people think on different sides of the country. I like longer run time too, but for a different reason. Here, you could have a perfectly well-designed duct system that goes fine in the winter, but come summer, it's 115, 118 degrees outside. When that unit shuts off, one room's hot. It don't matter how the ductwork's set up. The heat's coming in so fast from the side the sun's on, those people are hot in their bedroom, and unless the air is actually moving, it's just the differences get so high. So, you know, we're all about runtime, but just simply so we can even out the temperatures from room to room from that difference in heat load, you know.
Yeah, well, having the ductwork in the attic sure doesn't help.
Yeah, it's up there in the heat, that's for sure. Heck, it's 150 in our attics, literally. Well, it might be 140. That's not exaggeration. It's 140 degrees up there sometimes.
Yeah, well, I just came back from Arizona a couple weeks ago. We actually put some dry climate suggestions in the iManifold application because we were seeing some issues with the other big challenge you guys have up there is fixed orifice systems. They're absolutely impossible to charge correctly because the outdoor air temperature is too high and the humidity is too low for the metering device to work properly. So your target superheats are always in the dash range or below 5 degrees on a fixed orifice system. You know, it's almost impossible to do what you guys need to do out there.
You know, now that you mention it, your iManifold has told me target superheat is like 5 almost every time.
Yeah.
Fixed rate. It's pretty much 5. You're right.
Yeah, because we won't let it calculate below 5 because that's what carrier. You can extrapolate it out below 5. The problem becomes is what's called total measurement uncertainty. So every measurement you make has uncertainty in the measurement. Like your humidity is plus or minus, let's say 1% relative humidity. Your temperature that we're measuring a return air dry bulb with is plus or minus 1 degree. Your suction line temperature is plus or minus a degree. You're measuring pressure at 0.5% accuracy, and it's got plus or minus, let's say, 0.7 psi. And so when you're calculating things out, all of those uncertainties multiply together. So the uncertainty in the iManifold is probably about plus or minus 1.8 degrees for subcooling and plus or minus about 3 degrees for superheat. So if it called for 3 degrees of superheat and you charge to exactly 3 degrees, you could be at 0 or you could be at 6 because of your uncertainty, because it's plus or minus 3 degrees. So
right.
when they tell you, you know, not to charge in the dashed ranges, it's because with a typical analog gauge, you can only get at best plus or minus 5 degrees. And so what's going to happen is you could be at 0 or very close to 0 if you're at 5. So the manufacturers don't want you to go below 5 degrees of superheat.
Right, and that's also leaving the evaporator where, you know, what about this? Most techs are checking superheat, subcooling at the condenser, you know. But you know, Tim, I am refrigeration a guy, so you know, you're supposed to check it at the evaporator.
Mm-hmm.
But like for instance, what's that company? Heatcraft. Heatcraft wants 25 degrees of superheat, but 6 inches from the compressor, because that's what the compressor wants. So you might want 10 leaving the evaporator, but you want 25 going into the compressor. And so checking your superheat outside, already you're going to want it to be higher than your target.
Right. The challenge is you cannot accurately measure superheat at any point in the system unless you have a pressure and a temperature at the same location. Because if you were to measure your, like on train equipment, they used to always put a suction pressure port at the evaporator outlet. And you could actually, what's really cool if you get on one of those systems, if you use a wireless pressure probe, is you can measure the pressure drop in the suction line and also the evaporator superheat and the total superheat. And what you'll find out is that there's usually a 3 to 5 psi drop between the point that you're typically measuring at the condenser and the actual outlet of the evaporator coil. And
right.
So if you go to like the old Sportland charts and you see them, it used to tell you take the pressure at the compressor, add 2 to 3 psi to get your suction pressure at the evaporator, and then calculate your superheat that way. So,
Right.
but the manufacturer have cheapened everything up to the point to where they're telling you measure total superheat at the condensing unit, and basically what you're doing is making your suction line into an extension of the evaporator coil.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of those things that are minor. A lot of people overlook, but it's there. I like more like a 20, like a 18, 20. If I'm looking for 10 upstairs, I want 18 outside, 15.
Yep. And what you could do, what I would do, a couple things. If I was in your area, I would take my one of my my return air temperature probe, plug a probe into the side of it, and check temperature of the suction line at the outlet of the evaporator coil, and then monitor also at the inlet to the compressor, and look at your total superheat gain. Because let's say there's a couple things that'll show you if your suction line, let's say it came out at 50 degrees, and by the time it got to your condensing unit, you picked up additional 10 degrees, and you had a 60-degree suction line. It tells you probably should have a little heavier insulation. I don't know what you guys run out there. Probably should be running 1/2-inch suction line insulation, so you don't have a lot of additional superheat gain. And then that's one thing you can do. And then you could get your superheat closer to map your suction line temperature over, and get it closer to 5 degrees superheat at the outlet of the evaporator, and then not make because here's the other thing that you got to remember: if you overfill the evaporator with warm liquid, you're just going to make it into into extension of the liquid line. Getting some feedback from somebody.
We know who it is.
So.
John, yeah, I'm going to try to. That doesn't help.
You have a headset you can plug in, John? That works.
Just cut out.
Hey, who's got the truck in the picture there? Is that Joe?
Yes.
What part of the country are you in?
North Florida, Tallahassee.
In Tallahassee.
Yes.
All right. So you said when you're doing your manual J's, you're actually running what kind of systems you running there? Running 25 degree. I have never seen anything running a evaporator coil at 25 degrees colder than the return air. Who's making that system?
Goodman, in low stage. I do a lot of. I've been doing some new construction zoned homes.
Oh, you're talking on a second stage cooling. It's running 25 degrees colder than the return air.
You mean low stage cooling?
Yeah, first stage, right?
Hey, you guys, I don't mean to interrupt real quick, but I got 3 more service calls, so I got to run. I wished I could stay longer. I've learned a lot from you guys, but I'm going to leave this thing going so you guys can continue chatting, and I'll watch it later. But I got 3 customers waiting on me still. So.
All right.
All right. Pleasure, guys. I'm
Thanks.
going to leave this on. So.
Cool.
All right. No, what I was getting at is, now you can.
Jim, I can make a single stage unit do the same thing as that unit is doing in low stage by just oversizing the evaporator.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can design it that way. Absolutely.
Right. And what I'm doing is I'm just pulling less watts, and now I'm having to run longer.
Are you able to control humidity though with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kind of are you looking at dew point temperatures, or what do you control? What kind of humidity are you trying to control down to?
55 at 75. Even I believe I plotted it out before, and I was still removing humidity, although it gets to be very little.
Yeah, because I was going to say, if you just took 75 minus 25, you're at a 50-degree evaporator. And if you're at a 50-degree evaporator, the dew point of the evaporator is a little above 50, so you can't get your humidity below 50.
50% at 75, right?
Yeah,
right.
because exactly, because
Well,
when
as it falls below 75, my evaporator should fall below 50. And
yeah,
you're
it
right,
will,
Jim.
exactly, yeah. It'll start to track it almost exactly. So because whatever the evaporator temp is, that's the lowest you can get the dew point temperature in the house, right? Because
Right.
at 100% relative humidity, which is the condensing point of the coil for the air, right? You're going to be at your dew point temperature, and it's just interesting. I never seen. I mean, I understand obviously if you oversize the evaporator, you're going to raise the suction pressure, lower the compression ratio.
Yeah, you get more BTUs than it's rated for.
Insensible, you're going to get a lot more sensible BTUs.
Sensible, right?
But your
Right.
latent's going to drop down to next to nothing.
Think next to nothing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would think next to nothing.
But the water's pouring out of the drain line. That's why I don't argue with it,
Yeah, well, you got more surface area, but it might pour
Yeah.
out initially because your humidity's high. But I'm thinking about once the load's under control and you're talking it's 75 in the house and it's creeping up to 76. And what are your customers setting their thermostats at most of the time?
Some of them really like it cold at night, and they'll actually put it below 70, 68, and then they'll keep it 72 during the day. I haven't had a problem meeting sensible demand.
No, and you wouldn't have a problem with sensible demand, but I'm wondering if that's why they're dropping the temperatures down lower, it's because they can't get the humidity's too high otherwise.
Well, see, I have a feeling, Jim, that if we just measured the water coming out of the drain lines between two homes, one that was oversized compared to my home running a colder evaporator, but cycling more because it's meeting the demand quicker,
Mm-hmm.
and then measured the water coming out of a unit that's running longer, but it is, of course, a warmer evaporator, but it's running near constantly.
How is it running near constantly without satisfying the sensible demand faster? Because if you got more sensible cooling, that's what's going to satisfy the thermostat. So are you undersizing the system and oversizing the evap? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not saying I undersize it, but I'm saying when it is 95, which is our design day,
Mm-hmm.
you would probably have to run near constant to do 72.
You have to play around with that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. But I do have one question I'd love to get your insight on. I've found water collecting on the blower housing, and I've been trying to figure out, is the air coming off as like a vapor almost like a fog? It's at 100% saturation.
Well,
and then how could it recondense on the blower housing?
Well, you're talking a draw-through type evaporator, right?
Yeah, air handler, yep.
So the only thing that'll do that is if your airflow is excessive and it's pulling the water off the evaporator coil.
Okay.
Because the air will always be at 100% relative humidity when it comes off an evaporator coil or close to it, minus the bypass factor of the coil. All right?
Yeah, because what I had seen was like 0.8 or 80%, something like that.
Yeah, so if it's 80% relative humidity, it's not raining in there, right? But it is condensing on the evaporator coil. But there's some air that's called, there's a bypass factor of a coil. There's some air that goes through the evaporator coil that's not conditioned. Okay, and that's when you look at have you ever gone into the performance section of the iManifold app?
Yes.
All right, there's one that's called bypass factor, and it
I'm
calculates.
familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, it calculates the bypass factor of the coil. So the only thing that'll do what you're saying is if your air velocity across the coil is too high, above probably about 700 feet per minute, it actually pulls the water off the coil and the droplets are hitting the evaporator coil.
Yeah, I'm having some new installations where it's just a manufacturer's design problem that's causing this. So it's not pretty, yeah.
No,
I
I
know
can't
exactly what
imagine
you're
it.
saying, but I was thinking it really looked like the water was recondensing on the blower housing. It was just odd because
Yeah, in order for that to happen, the housing would have to drop below the dew point temperature of the air.
so what I was thinking, Jim, is on its off cycles. Don't you think that coil kind of warms up from the liquid migrating to it, and then it kind
The
of
coil,
re-evaps the moisture on the big coil?
if you were to, it's actually funny, if you were to cycle off your air conditioning and have the probes still in the ductwork, what you're going to see is that you still have a bunch of sensible cooling going on because the evaporator coil at that point becomes an evaporative cooler because there's all this water on it and it starts to re-evaporate. And it'll actually cool the air down until all the water evaporates off the coil. I have a video of that online. It's on Jim Bergman 3 YouTube channel I did for TrueTech Tools. It's on the SPD2, the field piece induct psychrometer, where I actually show how that's working because that's a really good psychrometer to show that.
Yeah, that was a neat video. I think I saw that one.
And that's what happens. It just becomes an evaporative cooler. So it's probably not recondensing on there. It's probably just pulling water off the coil. It could be because the just the way their blower's designed. You know, it's creating a
vortex.
two little
Yeah.
vortex tornadoes and just pulling the water right off of it.
Yeah. Mhm.
So. Well, anybody else got any more questions? It's about 10:17 here for me. I'm going to hit the sack soon.
Well, thanks for stopping by and answering our questions.
Yeah, sure. So, if you guys got any other questions you think of them, let me know. And you're gonna see a bunch of updates in the app the next couple of weeks. We're working on extending our cloud services out and doing some other cool stuff with basically. The reason we're doing geotagging on the equipment is eventually, as a company, you're going to be able to store that information on the cloud, and it'll recognize when you're back on a job site. And it'll ask you when you said geotag my location, it's going to say, are you at Mrs. Jones's house? You'll hit yes. It'll pull in Mrs. Jones's address, phone number, email, equipment model numbers, and serial numbers. Pull in the profile from the last guy that used it, that profiled the system, so everybody's working off the same baseline stuff, and really make it a lot faster to service anybody you do service contract work with or anything like that. And the only people that'll see that information is people within your company, so it won't be open to the public. It's stored on, so if a employee is associated with your company, they'll be able to have access to that information. And then we've got, I think, 4 different reports coming out in the next version of the app, which will be coming out. I think we're going to do another release on Friday. There'll be a release. You guys should see an Apple update this week, and then we'll do another release next Friday, and that'll be probably a week in Apple's review process. But Android will come through right away. We've got a bunch more reports and things coming out for the iManifold. So, a bunch of new stuff coming.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I'm going to bail out then. I'll talk to you guys later, and maybe I'll see you again in one of these chat rooms here.
Adios.
All right. Bye.
Well, that was cool.
It's nice to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, as they would say.
Yeah, it's a cool product. Nobody can deny that. Nobody can deny. There's a lot of neat things.
Yeah, it's for my purposes and for the customers that I work with. I'm glad that I had the ability and the opportunity to pick one up, because it's, and being that now me and Ruben are the only ones working up in this area, it's nice to be able to share stuff back and forth with him. And you get, if he goes out to the call first and then I follow up behind him, we're using the same stuff, so customers getting the same report, the same level of service every time.
And it sounds invaluable for that.
It's a nice thing to have. What are you thinking about the iManifold there, Billy?
I like it. It's, it's worth its weight in gold as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I saw that when I saw that you were using it. I knew you were going to do it up there. 'Cause I had a glass of it. I'm preferring the Mountain Neck. For what it does, you can't do that. I am interested. I'm sure you guys probably saw. I saw Larry Cole had posted it. That little brief bulletin from Testo that came out made me wonder if they're working on something or if they're just using it as a way to delay releasing something until they kind of perfect it. German engineering.
They are working on additions to their app now for the 550 and 557. For right now, there's nothing in it for target superheat, target subcooling, nothing. You can't input any of that. It just kind of, what it is, and you're looking at the app and the gauges, and just trying to remember what's what. So they're trying to. The next version of the app, which is supposed to come out in August, that version is going to have that in it. So they're doing that, and they're doing. And they weren't calling it trending because they have the trending stuff now, but they have the. It was data logging for their stuff, and an evacuation and a leak test portion of the app itself. So, they're trying to incorporate as much stuff, I think, as they can. I don't believe the 550s have a radio built in to use anything like the, Zigbee sensors or anything like that, because nothing will communicate with the manifold itself, because everything on it works Bluetooth or it's wired in. So,
Right.
It's not quite as advanced as the iConnect, the iManifold, but I guess they're trying to keep the price down and get everybody digital first, and then slowly but surely probably start to roll things out.
Yeah, it's like I know I jumped on the digital train really quickly because, heck, when I came down here, I was semi-seriously doing HVAC up north when I was still in New Jersey, and thinking about what the companies that I was working for knew about air conditioning. It's surprising we had systems that even worked. You got a company full of guys that go, well, as long as the suction's above 60 psi, we're good.
Right.
That's the way they were teaching me. And when I came down here, I think it was 2 weeks in, and I was like, I didn't even know what superheat and subcooling were. And I jumped on S-Man 3s probably a month in. And I was like, I need to get something that helped me understand it better. Learned it the analog way, so to speak. The analog way. Later, following after that, when the S-Mans went down, because God knows they were good at breaking. If they're good at one thing, it's not working. And learned it that way, and was having to do it that way for a couple of months. And just, switching to digitals made a big difference. It was fun to be able to actually watch it, especially when you're dealing with those analog flutterless gauges. You really can't see things as they move. watching it's so much easier to watch problems. I've watched my a new install from maybe about a month and a half ago when I was still putting in Linux stuff. Watching the TXV hunt 7.5 degrees for 45 minutes was like starting to creep me out a little bit. And I thought if I had analog gauges, I wouldn't be seeing any of this, or not as quickly as I'm seeing it now. I'd be watching it going, well, that seems strange. I wonder what the problem is. But watching it jump in a span of a minute.
Right.
2 degrees of subcooling all the way up to 10.5, and then superheat just kind of bouncing, jump up down, real low, real high, real low, real high. It was, I wish that I had iConnect to just kind of watch and see if there was anything else going on, but digital gauges, going digital first seems like a bigger deal than getting people on board with something that's doing all the work for you.
I understand everybody's point with, everybody's got to know the basics behind it all, and I couldn't agree more. But the constant bashing is just, it's gotten me just ridiculously sick. I mean, I went from having analog gauges last summer to having the new 550s and having the iManifold, in one fell swoop. In a matter of a week, I had 2 digital manifolds. So I can't imagine not using them. Not saying that I can't do stuff with the analog, but why? If I know the principles behind it, why not just stay digital? Even now, I mean, Testo, for one of the trade schools upstate in New York, they gave everybody the new 550s for the kids to learn with. So, if it's going to teach them the principles behind superheat and subcool in the real world, and it's going to teach them, how to interpolate what they're seeing, why do you need to do the long calculations? Why do you need to try to figure out all of that on your own? If you know what it's, you're getting the background for it, why not start digital? And I catch crap for saying it, but I don't understand why you wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to know how to do it the old way.
Right.
God forbid, if my Testo's broke and I was, all I could, that means if my Testo's broke before I got this iConnect, the only thing I would have had to roll with is a Z-Man. And, a Z-Man and a meter, and as old school and odd as it would feel after getting so used to digital gauges, I could still get by.
Right.
I can't say I'm no super tech, as everybody's been saying. I think that I could, I think at this point I've taught myself enough and learned enough from watching others' videos and having conversations with people, just picking everybody's brain every chance I get, that I could get by and still do a pretty decent job. But when it comes down to being able to set it up and watch it, I know that if I go get a Target Superheat, I'm not going to walk back inside the house and check it again 10 minutes later when it's going to be different. I'm just going to charge and hit as close as humanly possible.
Right.
A couple of degrees isn't going to make a difference, but then that kind of, Steven and I were having the chat earlier today that the job that he installed Wednesday, he said, look at the report. He sent it to me, and the first thing I said to him was, what the hell's up with this EER? That's a 15-SEER system, and according to what you got written here on this report, it's running at 10.
Right.
If I just went by superheat, subcooling, temperature split, which for me was always, between 15 and 18 degrees, was what I was always told, and that's what I always hunted for. If I saw that just rolling with analog, I'd assume that everything was fine. But
yeah, but that 15, it's not SEER. EER is not SEER. It wasn't a 15 EER.
Yeah, I know that, but it kind of makes me wonder why it would be running so low.
Right.
what's influencing it to run at that. Because I mean, that's just an interest point for me. What's influences are hitting this system and making it run at a lower efficiency than I would expect it to. Normally I put in a 15 SEER unit while it's running. I see it running somewhere between maybe 13 and 15 to 16. To see it running that low, it just kind of makes me question what's going on with it. Is there something odd that I didn't see while it was when I first put it in or when I first started running it? Not that there's anything wrong with it, because it's if you look at the numbers, it's cooling like a champ. But I think Jim had also pointed out that it had, let me see, it was low latent cooling.
Yeah.
I mean, now the customers haven't complained. There was nothing wrong with it. It was cooling well, but I guess that's kind of the plague of the digital age, is now that I can see so much stuff. What's important, what's really important, and what really isn't. Is it really that big a deal that I was seeing it floating around 10 just in that situation? How hot was it in the house at the time? How hot was the attic? Was it picking up any additional heat on the way down? Is something affecting the ductwork? What's the duct system like? What's static pressure at? So it's just for me, it becomes where is it good enough, and what's going too far based on the information that it gives you. I can't even pretend I understand everything that shows up on that report without reminding myself or Googling something occasionally, because I can't remember what it means. I think it's every 3 days I have to remind myself what latent cooling means.
Right.
And once a week, bypass factor just goes straight back out. But for me, it's just I like that I can commission a system and show a customer that it's running like a champ. And when it's not running well, I can show them why. I think that's been the whole thing for me, was that it's easier for me to communicate to somebody.
The two carrier systems that I had just started up, the Carrier Infinities, and using the iManifold, and the customer was right over my shoulder the whole time when we were setting everything up and getting it fired up. And he was absolutely amazed, seeing the actual tonnage and BTU output of the system. And there was a 2-ton and a 4-ton system in there, and the one, I think, at the highest it was running 4.07 tons, and then at its lowest was 3.98. So I mean, for him to see he was getting out of it what he basically paid for, and the other contractor that we were working with liking it so much that he went on True Tech Tools that night and bought himself a iConnect and everything he needed. So and he's looking to get out of the game. He's looking to retire in less than 3 years. But it just the information that you get out of it is it's amazing. So I can't fault anybody for using it. I mean, I've been drooling over the systems for since they came out. I had one falling in my lap damn near literally, so it's I'm lucky, so I can't imagine not having it.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I wouldn't have got one if I didn't end up where I am now. I'd still be rolling with my testos, but there's so many things that it just for my market, it's kind of the right tool to do what I got to do here. I was saying before, I don't know if either of you were in the chat room when I was saying it, is that Raleigh's like Silicon Valley 2.
Right.
People, it's all computer stuff here. Durham, Research Triangle Park, IBM is up in Durham. I got Merck in Durham. Everybody that's up here is for lack of a better term, a little nerdy.
Mm-hmm.
And they like to know what's going on with the system. I got people asking me all the time, I read about this online. What does it mean? Why is it? And Steve, I mean, we've been to 3 or 4 customers that found him on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, well, I picked him because, you know, I get this report when everything's done. You know, I can write you up a report card all day long, you know, from a standard invoice or something like that, but it seems like people just kind of like to see it. They might not understand what you're seeing, but what they're seeing, but then they might go look it up later. You know, I've run into, and I mentioned it earlier too, I worked at a guy's house who was an engineer for Carrier's commercial division. And he walked me through everything, every last step of the design on his house, the ductwork, how everything was set up. He was explaining to me why he chose to do free air return, and why he chose to set up his supply runs the way they were, and why it was zoned a specific way. And it's to be, if I would have had this to show him, how exactly it's running, to see if he was right about what he chose to do with the ductwork and all the setups. For me, with running into box and flex, I know I was in New Jersey for forever and a day, and it's just like what you deal with. It's all hard trunks.
Mm-hmm.
Now I see box and flex, and everybody knows the 90-degree boot is probably HVAC's worst nightmare. Whoever invented that is an asshole. But you got guys down here that'll take a flex run real high to the joists, and it'll just bend it right in.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of using a 90 boot, they made it themselves, and you're losing all its efficiency right there. Steve was telling me about a customer that they fixed the problem just by taking the ducts from lying on the floor of the attic and raising them up just so it was a gentle bend going into the supply. It pretty much took care of the entire airflow issue. If I could show somebody what I was seeing on that without having to walk around and do the break out something like a DAFM3 or that AAB meter that everybody was grabbing onto without having to sit there and time it out and get relatively close. I've seen enough testing between a meter like that and what comes through on iManifold, provided you're within the temperature ranges, and that gives me enough information to say that this is working the way I expected it to. Or it's not working the way that I expect it to, we should probably look at this.
Right.
Knowing, being what we are in North Carolina, I could pretty much just say, if I didn't put your ductwork in, it sucks. So let me change it, and then we'll go back and look at it all over again. Someone like Joe, though, you're like Mr. Psychometrics.
No.
That seems like your thing. Every time I watch a video, especially me and Steven are doing a pack install. We started today, and we're finishing. Well, I think I'm going back on Monday by myself to tie up these things. But we're doing 3 zones on a pack, and the first thing I could think of was, I wonder if I'm doing this correctly. I should probably watch some of Joe's videos.
My way of doing it is not exactly industry accepted,
If it works, though, it works.
It works, and there are companies that are starting. It follows along with some new, it follows along with the modulating zone movement that the industry is going. It's just a cheap version. We've got a low budget, and it works well. It works well. And kind of just speaking from a hardworking tech who, man, to drop $2,000 on a tool, it's a significant investment. It's kind of like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Am I going to make that much more money?
Well, thus far, it's started to pay for itself just from the install Steven did on Wednesday. I mean, the guy was there with me while I was dumping the refrigerant in. You know, I showed him what I saw. I explained to him what was going on, and he said, "Go ahead and put it in." And then, 10 minutes later, he came back out and was like, "What would it be?" First, it was I don't have the money to change out the upstairs system since we were already there doing the downstairs system. And then it became, well, maybe it would be worth it for me to look at it. And from, I don't know how your company rolls, but the way we roll is if somebody turns over a lead and it sells, you get, I don't know, it's like $75 or something like that. With the way things are down here, there's a lot of new construction, but there's still a ton of old stuff. You turn over enough leads, the last I checked, the last company that I had that was keeping metrics on my lead turnover to lead closing, I was at like somewhere between 45 and 65%, given whether or not it was a busy season or not. So to be close to 50%, if I were using this and kind of scoring it left and right, and it was helping me explain stuff better to people, then yeah, I think it would pay for itself. I mean, I've gotten lucky, and tool accounts go a long way. They certainly help. I don't know that I would drop. I think the iConnect kit was like $1,600, $1,700.
Mm-hmm.
The basic kit. I don't know that I would drop it out of pocket and not cry a little bit.
Yeah.
But for what it's been, for how it's been helping me, like, in the video that I posted when I opened my iConnect, I said that something along the lines of that it makes me a better tech, which turned into it makes you a better tech. It just works for me because it's giving me vision of stuff that I haven't seen before. If I haven't gotten to that chapter in the book yet, then I don't know it. Nobody.
Yeah, and everyone's got to experience it on their own time, And as a new tech, I do think the iManifold would really help you go way faster, leaps and bounds ahead. But I do think there's something about also kind of looking at those analog gauges and almost feeling the lines to really kind of get a feel for what you're doing as well. So, in the beginning, anyway.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying everyone should be introduced to analog just to get an understanding of it. It's if it's got to be analog, I like liquid gauge heads just because I'm a stickler for accuracy. But if you're not at least trying it to see that you know how to do it, it's more than just knowing the theory. You should know how to go through the whole motion of doing everything. What happens if the day comes and iManifold crashes or something weird happens? What do I do then? And my testos don't work. I gotta do what I said before: break out the Z-Man, get my meter out, and find my little wet bulb thermometer piece and start walking around and doing things the old way. Sure it'll take a heck of a lot longer, but it'll still get done. For me, the upside is just speed, efficiency, the ability to just walk in, walk out, get the same amount of information and maybe a little bit more without having to spend the time walking about and figuring it out.
Oh yeah, I know it's one of those things that if I had one, I would be just as excited as you were to open it and to start using it. I'm kind of glad that I waited because I would have bought an iManifold and I really wanted an iConnect, and there was kind of a lot of things that weren't quite true, about the range that you got, and then kind of about the airflow. Well, it's going to tell you airflow. Well, it can be really easily skewed either way. So,
yeah, there are some things about it that are still coming together. But I mean, now with I think Jim was saying in a message the other night that they're like 4 to 5 weeks away from production on the manometer probe, which would, now we can integrate static pressure and see, if you've got the blower performance chart there. I guess it would kind of help to confirm whether or not your airflow is accurate or not, and without having to rely on an outside source, a different meter or something like that, and you still get as close to a mostly accurate reading as you can get. I won't say perfect because that would just be impossible, but you get the most accurate readings that you can possibly get there.
Yeah, that's pretty undeniable.
Yeah, I think for I'm sure being in North Florida, you deal with let's say 80% air conditioning and less heating than anything. Here I get kind of a dead solid mix of 50-50. It's some of it's furnaces and the fact that I can do clocking the gas meter and temperature-rise test on a furnace with the same tool that I would use for a heat pump and an air conditioner. It just kind of it works for me. And being that the manometer is coming, I can do more things with testing out gas pressure and combustion analysis, which I'm sure is going to be another nightmare because that's another $1,300 or $1,400 tool that I'll have to invest in. Thank God we don't have as much gas as we did in New Jersey. Hated heat pumps when I got here, but I'm sure as hell love them now.
Yeah, I like heat pumps too. We have a lot. We're mostly heat pumps here in North Florida.
I think we had, when I was in New Jersey, we had one customer with a heat pump, and I know that company, I did everything for them, dispatch, service, install everything. Out of probably 30 or 40,000 customers, we had one person with a heat pump. It was a 1.5 ton heat pump with a 15 kW heat strip set in there. That's the only way it works. Which makes me laugh and wonder why they even bother to put the damn things in there.
That's a lot of electric heat.
Yeah, I guess it was literally the only heat pump I had seen, and the way that somebody had explained it to me, I didn't even go upstairs to see how it worked because I was just like, no, I'll braze, and that's it. You can fool around with all the electrical crap, but now that I'm down here and I get tortured by them left and right, and I can just get comfortable with it. And
yeah, they're actually really easy, not scary at all.
Yeah, and once somebody just, I forget who it was, somebody was like, it's a reverse air conditioner, and it finally clicked. I understood what the reversing valve was for, and, one silly little sounding sentence, and I was like, oh, I get it now. Problem solved. Now I'll get it figured out.
Which does throw in some interesting charge balance issues that you'll start to, and, I've never played with the iManifold, the heat pump. And I've never really seen Steven do a detailed video about what it actually displays for the heat pump mode. As far as like maybe a target temperature split or something, I don't know.
It's unusual because you'll get a bad reading or an incorrect reading on airflow if the heat strips kick on. The only way to be accurate is with them off. But I found we actually went to one that was, this was probably a month or two ago before I even started at Cape Fear. I went to one and the charge was off by like 1.5 pounds because they charged it in heating. Commissioned in the winter, they based it on the chart inside, the Lennox chart inside the control compartment, And the damn thing was like 1.5 pounds or almost 2 pounds off of charge. But if you follow that chart, everything was solid. It seemed like it was working like it was supposed to. I wish I could have seen what the performance was like if I had iConnect to kind of measure it out and see what it's like. But I guess that would be a good one to remember to ask Bergman. Kind of see what a heat pump looks like. Run it, I've seen them run it just to get basic pressure, temperature, superheat, subcooling, and such.
So it does not have any of that right now, you're saying?
I don't know. I haven't even delved that far into it.
Yeah.
I've played around with it a little bit, but I mean, everything at my house is straight cool, so I haven't had the opportunity to play and find out what it does, what its capabilities are for heat pumps in heating mode. I have found it was a slightly different setup for obviously when you're hooking everything up, and then temperature rise will play a big part in what you see on airflow. But overall, I've been led to believe it's basically the same. We'll get the same type of performance report. And it'll be pretty much exactly like you would see for air conditioning. And then you've also got the ability to do furnaces, clocking the meter, and BTUs. Not BTUs, what the hell was I talking about? CFM, based on temperature rise.
Yeah, that gets into a whole nother thing.
Yeah, it's.
But how long does Steven take on like a PM when he's doing all that stuff?
It depends. It really depends on if we've been there before or not. It's when it comes to the testing, you figure 15 minutes of runtime before we're getting the steady numbers that we'd expect to see, and literally I can get it set up in 2 to 3 minutes, including walking around and putting my probes in the plenums and setting up any extra repeater that I think I might need. I mean, it's almost the same amount of time that I would normally spend doing a PM. Because we've done a couple. We did a 4-system maintenance, and we were only there about 4 hours, 4.5 hours at most. Figure it's on average about an hour per system.
And he's cleaning the coils like we see him do on everyone too, taking them all apart. Like that?
Yeah, the only thing we haven't actually pulled apart was something that was commissioned in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
If it was put in by Cape Fear, if it were put in by someone else, it's getting torn out, one way or the other. But most of it is, if it's a complete tear down, figure an hour and 20 minutes. Depending, some of them. Sometimes they go quick. Sometimes it'll take forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's, some PMs are lasting longer just based on what we're finding when we start them up and we start seeing, what the performance is like. Is
that when Steven kind of stops and goes and says, "Do you want me to go further with it or something?"
Yeah, he'll take a look at something and tell the customer, which is what I was saying before. You can show them, this is what we see, this is what the targets are, this is what that means. Explain it well enough that I've seen letters come in from customers thanking him for using lay terminology, and tell him exactly what you said. Do you want me to go any further into this? Do you want me to fix what you got going on here? And a standard PM could turn into if they want us to actually get into the system. We did a PM on one that turned into forget what it was. I don't remember if it was changing out a coil or something like that, but it went from being a standard hour and a half long call to being 3. And that's just, for him, it's being a perfectionist and finding out how to make it run the best it possibly can. But when it comes to the time spent actually collecting the information to get it to where it is, it's minimal compared to what I'm used to doing, running around, getting all the information, and then having to communicate it to the customer. The majority of the time that he spends on a call is spent doing the repair, and for him, he does like I do. If we're going to pull a vacuum, it's whether the microns are down or not, it's running for at least an hour or more, and then we're watching things as they go, and then we both do it the same way. We charge, we get that unit running, and then we continue to charge, so that way we're approaching rather than trying to bring it back down. It seems to be more like the repair is what takes him longest, rather than the troubleshooting and the performance of a unit.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the iManifold doesn't say, oh, wrong size piston in the evaporator, or dryer's restricted that's in this condenser outside.
Yeah.
I mean, you still have to figure out why those numbers aren't right, and then tell the customer, I don't really know how much it's going to take to fix it because I'm not quite sure what's wrong yet. It's just something's not right,
Yeah. I think it's been most beneficial in situations where, and again, I think it's really based on market too, what people are looking for, what the people are like, what the customers are like in the area. If I go to a customer and I tell them, this is a 13 SEER unit, but because of the way it's charged, and you got leaking, you're obviously leaking refrigerant, or it's low on charge, I can go hunt down a leak, but based on this, I can show them that your efficiency rating is running like crap. The second people hear that, whether or not it's a situation like we were discussing earlier, where it could be some outside influence that's causing that efficiency rating to go down. If people hear that it's not efficient, they want to get rid of it, and it drives sales. Which, despite wanting to keep everything alive and for as long as possible, at some point, I usually give in and say it's got to go. And using this has kind of made it a little bit easier. Plus, I mean, people are seeing it as, it's basically you put an eye in front of something, and everybody wants it, and everybody likes when you do it. If ever I get the chance and I release my eye duck knife, I'm sure people will be buying it left and right. It communicates with the ducks directly, and it sends back the information directly to your hand.
That's a perfect circle.
Yeah, it's a convenient Palm Pilot, and people would jump on it, but again, I think that's a market. It's a nice, for me, it's a nice tool to break it down for people, but it's working nice as a sales tool.
And I think you're right. It is just a different market. Working for a small company, it's just me and my dad, and working for people that just trust you. I can walk in without an iManifold, just say your system's running like crap, and basically get the same result. Of Steven and his iPad, but see, y'all are dealing with people who haven't really ever met you guys before, and you add credibility to what you're saying with that iManifold. So when you're in a large company and dealing with a lot of customers that you've never really met before, it really does, I do believe, add credibility to what you're saying. However, it's not going to make everybody outcomes that much better, if that makes any sense
Yeah.
to you. That's just what kind of holds me back from running out and jumping on one is, you know, I just don't see that my outcome is going to be. I mean, we're so busy. I don't really need to sell everyone I go to a new system because we don't have install crews ready to go every day to put another one in, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think it's,
but it's a novel. It's still sort of a novelty, I think you would say. There's a lot of people out there that drop a lot more than the iConnect on a MacBook,
yeah.
whatever nice computer they want or techie gadget, you know. So it's in that price range to be affordable if
It
you
is.
want it, you know.
It's certainly. What's funny is we use it in two different markets. We, Fayetteville, where the company is based, is, for lack of better terminology, country.
Mm-hmm.
Cape Fear's been down there for 40 years. They've got customers that have been with them for 38. And, you walk in the door, you got some guys rolling with S-Mans, and then you got Steven who walks in the door with, iManifold, iConnect, and they get a different piece of information from him, and they like it because it makes him, it fits with his persona. As
Mm-hmm.
when they walk in, they go, well, this guy, he must know everything about this thing. Is he found this problem, and he could show it to me on the screen. And then moving up into the Raleigh area, I mean, everybody up here is either from New Jersey or fucking Michigan or something. It's like one in every 4 customers I run into know somebody that I know in New Jersey or live down the street from somewhere I used to live, which isn't hard to do because I lived all over the damn state. And these people like this stuff. They think. I had a customer tell me that he almost didn't have me come back to the house because of my field piece gauges because he thought they were a toy. And I was like, oh no, they're not a toy. Come look at, come with me to the condenser. I'll show you what I'm looking at. And he's like, yeah, if anything big and bright and yellow hanging off the side of a unit, it just looks like a Tonka toy. It's customer perception played a big part in making the switch to other gauges, but now using something like this where they can look at it and be like, well, this can't be a toy. This looks like an exceptionally sophisticated piece of measurement and performance testing. The perception by the customer kind of makes a big difference in whether or not I get to go back to the house and whether or not they're happy with the service. And I think every single customer Steven walks into, they're all happy and they all say the same thing. We didn't know anything about our system before he got here, and then he showed it to us. So now we know how everything works. Well, or at least I think they do. But,
I wonder what they're seeing that they think they know everything about how it works.
I think it's when we actually, we will go to, and he's got me doing it too now that I've watched him do it so often, literally going in, showing them, giving them a rough idea of what we're looking at, basic explanation. This is what it means on the blue side, this is what it means on the red side, this is what these numbers mean, and then bringing them to the performance screen where we can show them, temperature split is off by 3.5 degrees, and you've got next to no dehumidification going on here because of this. Your airflow is below where it should be, so it's causing this. We get to see, or they think they're getting a look deeper into the system, and that they're finally understanding how it works, other than just assuming that the outside part is the air conditioner and the inside part is the heating. Get them to, I guess in their head they kind of see it now as one whole system and they get how it works.
I see, because they've kind of probably always seen air conditioning guys with these gauges, but no one's ever shown them. You don't sit there and show customers, oh, come over here and look at my gauges with me,
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it since I started doing maintenance. It's just because people will, a lot like Billy said earlier, you got guys who just follow you. They're literally. I had a guy I was doing an install at asking me 10,000 questions about what's the difference between first stage and second stage cooling on this 16-sphere Lennox we were putting in, while he was handing me tools. And sometimes you think maybe they're just following you around to make sure you don't screw it up, and then you got this guy who was literally handing me the right tool I needed without me saying a word. He obviously knows enough to be able to follow along, and he'll know if I'm bullshitting him or not. So those are the kind of people that they kind of want to know, and something like that lets them, I guess, see something that they're looking for, rather than saying, come here and take a look at this and trying to explain it that way. Slightly more visual presentation.
I try not to dumb things down for the customer, too much. We have a company here, I guess probably about 10 years ago, and the guy he wrote that he recharged the system on an invoice, and he recharged the Freon in the system is what he actually wrote. And the lady who he was working on happened to be an engineer for DuPont at the time, and because DuPont had coined the name Freon and he didn't use DuPont's refrigerant, he got sued and he lost his business.
Holy shit.
So, I try not to, everything for me is, I've got to add refrigerant, I've got to add whatever. It's, and with the iManifold, being able to take the tablet into the person's house, not bringing them out into my world, but bringing everything kind of into theirs and showing them exactly what's going on, not having to kind of dumb it down, because it specifically says, how much you're getting, how many, gallons an hour, how many pounds an hour, what are you pulling out, the CFM. All right, so they might not know what CFM is, but they can kind of grasp that pretty quickly. So, when it comes to doing that, it's nice to just be able to bring it in and say, this is what your system's doing right now, not this is what it was doing on my notepad 15 minutes ago. This is what it's doing right now, and showing them live, at the dining room table, which to me is just, it's well worth it. I mean, it's, it's even with the troubleshooting feature of the iManifold and seeing that little, icon pull up that, something's off, and being able to click on it and it to show you the possibility of what is wrong, whether there's a liquid line restriction or a suction line restriction or whatever. It kind of points people in the right direction where they can trying to explain it to a customer the way it's written out. I mean, yeah, it's written out more for us, but it's nothing that your average person couldn't grasp when you're trying to explain it. If you can't explain it, I mean, it's right there in black and white what you're trying to say. So to me, it is kind of a selling feature, when it comes down to trying to sell a repair or a replacement or whatever. But being able to bring everything in the house is, I try to educate the customers as much as I can, but being able to do that with this it's been amazing. And I've only had it for 2 months, and it's killer to have it.
It's one of those things that just, over time, I'm sure it'll become better. The more features they put in, it'll be more inclusive and hopefully conclusive when it comes to helping you pinpoint issues. I mean, I don't often use the troubleshooting thing other than to see what it has to say. Because more
right
down here, 9 times out of 10, I get I get that stupid message that says is this is an unusual problem.
Right.
It says it could literally be anything.
Right.
Call your ass into that house and figure it out. But I like the fact that when I do the startup and stuff, I can show people. Well, when I started it up, I had ridiculously high humidity, and that's something that we deal with on that house. So when I go back next time and I look at the last report I did at this house, yank it down from the cloud, see what I did when I was last here, and I don't see or I see something different, I'll know that there's been some sort of environmental change, and I can remember that for something else, which might lead me to finding a problem later on down the line. Something that we used to be there isn't there anymore. Something that wasn't there is now. It's kind of setting up for future success, I think. Anyway, guys, it is after 11, and David has to get up at 5 a.m. so he can make it to Fayetteville by 7:15.
Yeah, I'm out too, guys, but it's been fun.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So y'all have a good one. I guess we'll catch you on the next one.
Yep, later.
Take care, guys.